For today's video, I decided to raid the vaults and revisit a game that I played back in 2020. Like many people, I found myself unable to socialise and with a lot of time on my hands. Two things came out of that enforced idleness. The first was this YouTube channel, and the other was a renewed interest in solo wargames. This particular game was one of my first using the chain of command rules. The battle is a fictional encounter between advancing American forces and stubborn German defenders, a scenario that was probably replicated hundreds of times as the Allies pushed inland following the D-Day landings. Before the game started, I rolled for false morale and the Americans did really well, starting 3 points higher than the Germans. The patrol phase saw the US platoon secure jump-off points across the river, while the Germans ended up being relegated to either the table's edge or a couple of farm buildings. Because my table was so small, I decided to reduce the movement in the patrol phase for this game to 9 inches. On a regular sized table, this would normally be 12 inches. For this game, I opted for a basic rifle platoon for both sides with some support options. The Germans get an SD KFZ 251 armed with an MG42 and commanded by a junior leader, and the Americans got an M3 half-track with a junior leader and of course a 50 cal HMG. The Americans' higher force morale means they get to move first, so I moved quickly to capture the church as soon as I could. Securing an elevated position may give them an edge in the coming skirmish. They're going to need it because the Germans have superiority of firepower with each of their 3 squads containing a formidable MG42. The squad in the church is also joined by Platoon Sergeant O'Reilly, as this is likely to be a hotly contested position and they're going to need his leadership. The Germans meanwhile deploy 1 rifle squad into the small wood next to the farm overlooking the bridge, and a 2nd squad enters the main farmhouse, taking up commanding position from there. Under O'Reilly's direction, it doesn't take long for the US BAR team to set up in the church tower with an excellent field of view across the whole battlefield. The Germans also managed to get their MG42 to the first floor of the farmhouse, again giving them a good clear line of sight across most of the battlefield. Next, the US 2nd Rifle Squad deploys just across the bridge with their BAR team taking up a position in an abandoned earthwork. They immediately open fire on the Germans across the field on the edge of the forest, inflicting the first shot points of the game and the first kill. The German Obergefreiter in command knows the position is exposed and temporarily pulls his squad back out of line of sight behind the wood. At about the same time, the BAR team in the tower opens fire on the same German position in the forest. This fire, combined with that of the riflemen inside the church, kills another German infantryman, and 2 more shock is applied to the section. The Obergefreiter commanding the section narrowly avoids injury. The German rifle platoon section in the farmhouse looking down the road can see this firefight but doesn't have an angle on the church to reply. However, they can see the US rifle team in the wheat field by the bridge. Their MG42 is now in an elevated position on the first floor and can see the US rifle team hiding behind the bocage. The distinct zip sound of the MG42 and the rapid flurry of bullets causes 2 more points of shock on the Americans. By phase 4 of the game, the rattle of rifle and machine gun fire is starting to get louder. The US 2nd Squad rallies a point of shock and their leader shifts their position behind the churchyard wall next to the graveyard for a better cover. Meanwhile, the M3 on the road moves over the rise of the bridge and opens fire with its HMG at the farmhouse, shattering glass and showering the Germans inside with plaster. The Obergefreiter has to order his men to hold their ground. The Germans now deploy their last rifle squad and decide to try and outflank the fire coming from the church. They creep as close as they can get through the wheat field before being spotted by the BAR team up in the tower. In the exchange of fire that ensues, 1 US rifleman pays with his life. Now the German platoons and Feldwebel is deployed onto the table into the farmhouse to bolster the beleaguered section defending it. He immediately directs their fire on the US rifle team down the road in the cornfield, killing another GI and inflicting 2 more shock points. He also directs the team's Panzerschreck to begin moving into position to take a shot at the M3. The Obergefreiter with Squad 1 over in the wheat field rapidly crosses the ground and gets behind a wall in the shadow of the church where the BAR can't see them. Maybe they can rush the Yanks in the church. It is now Phase 5 and the US squad by the river and their BAR team in the earthwork and the HMG in the M3 open fire on the German squad in the woods. The squad is wiped out, leaving their wounded Obergefreiter and their MG-42 Lean team and the leader both pinned. With the firefight in the farm looking like it's under control, the US commander deploys his final rifle squad inside the church, sneaking in via a back door hidden from the enemy view. Meanwhile, the platoon's lieutenant deploys to support Squad 2 in the wheat field next to the graveyard. The German Panzerschreck team is still moving to get a clear shot at the M3, but crucially the Germans are finally able to bring on their SD-KFZ-251, which immediately opens fire with its MG-42 on the infantrymen in Squad 2 next to the graveyard. The wall they hide behind is strong, but under such a hail of fire it is unsurprising that 2 more riflemen are killed and the unit is pinned. As the game enters Phase 6, it feels like things are moving to a conclusion. Rifle fire from the American 2nd Squad kills the MG-42 operator in the woods and wounds the Obergefreiter for the second time. Bleeding heavily, he makes a hasty retreat, hoping to reach the cover of the farmhouse, but he's spotted by the BAR team in the church tower and is felled with a single shot to the head. German morale was becoming critical. One more setback and the fight could be over for the Germans. In desperation, the leader of the 2nd Squad, in the field behind the church, decides to launch an assault on the back of the church, aiming to lob hand grenades through the stained glass windows before rushing in through the back door. However, inside the church, Platoon Sergeant O'Reilly hears the Germans moving into position and decides not to wait for the inevitable attack. He flings open the back door and leads his squad out in a surprise countercharge, catching the Germans completely off guard. The resulting melee is short and decisive. The German squad loses several men and its leader is wounded, immediately breaking the squad and collapsing the whole platoon's morale. Knowing the situation is hopeless, the German commander decides to pull back his remaining men and concedes the ground to the Americans. Well, I hope you found that short battle report from the vault interesting. I certainly did, revisiting it again after all this time. I'm going to have to get my World War II stuff out again and play a little bit more Chain of Command.